The grand halls of Valdemir Castle echoed with whispered conversations as servants hurried through the marble corridors. King Alexander Rothwell, a man of 62 years, sat in his private study reviewing state documents when his trusted bodyguard, Captain Marcus Thornfield, noticed something unusual about the evening tea service. Captain Thornfield had served the royal family for 15 years and knew every detail of the palace routine. Tonight, however, Queen Isabella Rothwell personally carried the king's tea tray, something she had never done before. The queen, who had married the king only 3 years ago after his first wife's death, usually left such tasks to the palace staff. As Queen Isabella approached the king's desk with the ornate silver tray, Captain Thornfield observed her hands trembling slightly. The queen, normally composed and elegant, seemed nervous. Her emerald green dress rustled as she walked, and her jewelry caught the light from the crystal chandelier above. "Your Majesty," Queen Isabella said softly, placing the teacup before King Alexander, "I thought you might enjoy some chamomile tea tonight. It will help you sleep better." King Alexander looked up from his papers and smiled warmly at his wife. "How thoughtful of you, my dear. You know how much I appreciate your care." He reached for the delicate porcelain cup with its golden rim. Captain Thornfield, positioned near the door, noticed something that made his blood run cold. As Queen Isabella handed over the tea, he glimpsed a small empty vial tucked behind the sugar bowl on the tray. The vial was made of dark glass, the type typically used by the palace physician for medicines or poisons. The captain's training kicked in immediately. He had been taught to watch for any unusual behavior, any deviation from normal routines, and any potential threats to the king's safety. Queen Isabella's sudden interest in personally serving tea, combined with the mysterious vial, raised serious red flags. "Your Majesty," Captain Thornfield interrupted, stepping forward. "Perhaps you should let me taste the tea first, as protocol requires." Queen Isabella's face went pale. "That's really not necessary, Captain. It's just chamomile tea from our trusted kitchen." King Alexander waved his hand dismissively. "Marcus, you worry too much. Isabella wouldn't harm a fly." He lifted the cup toward his lips. Captain Thornfield made a split-second decision that would change everything. He lunged forward and knocked the cup from the king's hands. The porcelain shattered on the marble floor and the amber liquid spread across the expensive Persian rug. "Marcus, what has gotten into you?" King Alexander shouted, standing up from his chair in shock. Queen Isabella stumbled backward, her hand clutching her chest. "How dare you?" That was perfectly good tea. But Captain Thornfield wasn't finished. He quickly grabbed the empty vial from behind the sugar bowl and held it up to the light. A few drops of clear liquid remained inside, and he recognized the smell immediately. Bitter almonds, the signature scent of cyanide. "Your Majesty," Captain Thornfield said grimly, holding up the vial. "This contained poison. If you had drunk that tea, you would be dead within minutes." The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. King Alexander stared at the vial, then at his wife, then back at his bodyguard. Queen Isabella's face had turned completely white, and she began backing toward the door. "That's impossible," King Alexander whispered. "Isabella, tell him this is some mistake." Queen Isabella's composure finally cracked. Tears began streaming down her face, but they weren't tears of innocence. They were tears of someone whose carefully planned scheme had just fallen apart. I can explain," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. Captain Thornfield had seen enough guilty people in his career to recognize the signs. Queen Isabella's body language, her trembling hands, her inability to maintain eye contact, everything pointed to guilt. But what shocked him most was the lack of surprise on her face when he mentioned poison. An innocent person would have been horrified and confused. Instead, Queen Isabella looked like someone who had been caught. "Your Majesty," Captain Thornfield said to the king, "we need to secure the queen immediately and call for the palace physician to examine this vial properly." King Alexander sank back into his chair, looking like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The man who had ruled the kingdom of Valdemir with wisdom and strength for 30 years was now faced with the unthinkable. His own wife had tried to murder him. "Why?" King Alexander asked, his voice breaking. "Isabella, why would you do this?" Queen Isabella stopped crying and straightened her shoulders. For a moment, the mask of the loving wife slipped away completely, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You wouldn't understand," she said quietly. "You never did understand what it was like to be married to a king who everyone loved more than his own wife." The truth was beginning to emerge, and Captain Thornfield realized this was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous conspiracy than anyone had imagined. Within minutes of Captain Thornfield's discovery, the palace was in chaos. Guards rushed into the king's study, their boots clicking against the marble floor as they surrounded Queen Isabella. The woman who had been the kingdom's beloved queen just hours earlier was now a prisoner in her own home. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the royal physician, arrived with her medical bag and immediately began examining the mysterious vial. Her years of experience with various substances made her the perfect person to identify whatever poison Queen Isabella had used. "Your Majesty," Dr. Vasquez said after careful examination, "this is definitely cyanide. A lethal dose. If you had consumed even half of that tea, death would have been certain within 5 to 10 minutes. King Alexander buried his face in his hands. The woman he had married for love, the woman he had trusted with his life and his kingdom, had been planning to kill him. But as the initial shock wore off, questions began forming in his mind. "Isabella," he said, looking up at his wife, who now sat in a chair with guards on either side. "This couldn't have been your idea alone. You don't know anything about poisons. Someone helped you." Queen Isabella's eyes flashed with defiance. "You think I'm too stupid to plan something like this myself?" "No," King Alexander said sadly. "I think you're too smart to try it without help. Who else is involved in this conspiracy?" Captain Thornfield had been thinking the same thing. In his experience, assassination attempts against royalty were rarely solo efforts. There were usually multiple people involved, each with their own reasons for wanting the king dead. "Your Majesty," Captain Thornfield said, "with your permission, I'd like to search the Queen's private chambers. If there are other conspirators, we might find evidence there." Before King Alexander could respond, Queen Isabella laughed bitterly. "Go ahead, search everything. You won't find what you're looking for." Her confidence worried Captain Thornfield. Either she was bluffing or she had been very careful to cover her tracks. He decided to try a different approach. "Who gave you the cyanide, Your Majesty?" he asked directly. "We know you didn't obtain it yourself." Queen Isabella remained silent, but Captain Thornfield noticed her eyes dart quickly toward the window. It was a tiny movement, but he caught it. The window overlooked the palace gardens where several important buildings were located, including the quarters of high-ranking court officials. Dr. Vasquez, meanwhile, had made another disturbing discovery. "Your Majesty," she said to the king, "I need to run some tests on your recent blood samples. If the Queen has been slowly poisoning you over time, there might be traces in your system." This possibility sent chills through everyone in the room. If Queen Isabella had been gradually poisoning her husband, it would explain some of the king's recent health complaints, fatigue, occasional dizziness, and stomach problems that had puzzled Dr. Vasquez for weeks. "Take all the blood samples you need," King Alexander said grimly. "I want to know everything." As Dr. Vasquez prepared her medical equipment, Captain Thornfield noticed something else unusual. Lord Vincent Blackwood, the king's chief advisor and closest friend, had not yet appeared despite the commotion. Lord Blackwood lived in the palace and usually responded immediately to any emergency involving the royal family. "Where is Lord Blackwood?" Captain Thornfield asked one of the guards. "We sent word to his quarters, sir, but received no response. His servants say he left the palace earlier this evening and hasn't returned." This information made Captain Thornfield's suspicions grow stronger. Lord Blackwood's absence at such a critical moment was highly unusual. The man had been King Alexander's advisor for over 20 years and had never missed any important palace emergency. Queen Isabella seemed to relax slightly when she heard that Lord Blackwood was not in the palace. Captain Thornfield caught this reaction and filed it away in his mind. There was definitely a connection between the Queen and the missing advisor. "Your Majesty," Captain Thornfield said to the king, "I recommend we place the entire palace under lockdown until we can determine who else might be involved in this plot." King Alexander nodded slowly. "Do it. No one enters or leaves until we have answers." As guards hurried to secure all palace entrances, Dr. Vasquez finished drawing blood samples from the king. "I'll have preliminary results within an hour," she promised. Meanwhile, Captain Thornfield was developing a theory about the conspiracy. Queen Isabella's confidence, Lord Blackwood's convenient absence, and the sophisticated nature of the poison attempt all suggested a well-planned coup. But what was the ultimate goal? Simply killing the king wouldn't automatically make Queen Isabella the ruler. The kingdom had laws of succession that would make the king's younger brother, Prince Edmund, the next ruler. Unless, Captain Thornfield realized with growing alarm, Prince Edmund was also in danger. "Your Majesty," he said urgently, "we need to contact Prince Edmund immediately. If this is a broader conspiracy, your brother might also be a target." King Alexander's face went pale. Prince Edmund lived in a separate wing of the palace with his own family. If the conspirators wanted to ensure Queen Isabella could claim the throne, they would need to eliminate both the king and his heir. "Send guards to Prince Edmund's quarters immediately," King Alexander commanded, "and bring him here under full protection." As guards rushed toward Prince Edmund's wing of the palace, Queen Isabella spoke for the first time in several minutes. "You're too late," she said quietly, a strange smile playing on her lips. The words sent ice through Captain Thornfield's veins. What did she mean by too late? Had something already happened to Prince Edmund? Before anyone could respond, a guard burst into the room, his face white with panic. "Your Majesty," he gasped, "Prince Edmund is missing." His servants found his quarters empty, and there are signs of a struggle. The conspiracy was much larger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined, and Captain Thornfield realized they were racing against time to save not just the king, but the entire royal family. The news of Prince Edmund's disappearance sent shockwaves through the palace. Captain Thornfield immediately organized search teams while King Alexander struggled to process that his brother might already be dead. The conspiracy was unfolding faster than anyone had anticipated. "Seal every exit," Captain Thornfield ordered his men. "Search every room, every cellar, every tower. Prince Edmund must be somewhere in the palace grounds." Dr. Vasquez returned with the blood test results that confirmed everyone's worst fears. "Your Majesty," she said grimly, "there are traces of arsenic in your blood. You've been slowly poisoned for at least 2 months." King Alexander felt his world crumbling around him. The woman he loved had been systematically killing him while he trusted her completely. But now his focus shifted to his missing brother. "Isabella," he said, his voice cold as winter. "Where is Prince Edmund?" Queen Isabella sat in her chair with an expression of strange satisfaction. Edmund always thought he was so clever, so prepared for anything. He never saw it coming. Captain Thornfield stepped closer to the Queen. "If you've harmed Prince Edmund, you'll face charges of treason and murder. Tell us where he is and perhaps the king will show mercy." "Mercy?" Queen Isabella laughed harshly. "Alexander showed me no mercy when he paraded his perfect first wife's memory in front of me every day. When he made it clear I would never measure up to her legacy." The truth about Queen Isabella's motives was beginning to emerge. King Alexander's first wife, Queen Catherine, had been beloved by the people and had died tragically in a riding accident 3 years earlier. Isabella had always lived in Catherine's shadow, never quite winning the same level of affection from either the king or the kingdom. "So you decided to kill me because you were jealous of a dead woman?" King Alexander asked in disbelief. "It wasn't just jealousy," Queen Isabella snapped. "It was survival. Do you know what it's like to be constantly compared to someone perfect? To know that every day you fall short of a ghost?" Captain Thornfield interrupted the confrontation as one of his guards entered with urgent news. "Sir, we found something in Prince Edmund's chambers. There are traces of blood on the carpet, and this note was left on his desk." The captain read the note aloud. "The prince is safe for now, but his survival depends on the king's cooperation. Abdicate the throne by midnight or Prince Edmund dies." King Alexander staggered backward as if physically struck. The conspirators weren't just trying to kill him, they were trying to force him to give up his crown. But who would benefit from his abdication? "Who wrote this note, Isabella?" Captain Thornfield demanded. "We know you're not working alone." Queen Isabella's confident facade began to crack slightly. "You think you're so smart, Captain, but you have no idea how deep this goes." At that moment, another guard rushed in with more disturbing news. "Captain Thornfield, we've discovered that Lord Blackwood's quarters have been cleared out. His servants say he dismissed them earlier today and told them he was leaving on a long journey." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together in Captain Thornfield's mind. Lord Blackwood's disappearance, combined with his access to palace security and his knowledge of royal protocols, made him a prime suspect. But what was his motive? "Your Majesty," Captain Thornfield said to the king, "Lord Blackwood has been your advisor for 20 years. Has he ever expressed any dissatisfaction with your rule?" King Alexander thought carefully. Vincent has always been loyal, but he paused, remembering something. There was something strange last month. He asked me about the laws of succession, specifically what would happen if both Edmund and I were to die without heirs. This revelation sent chills through the room. If both King Alexander and Prince Edmund died, and Queen Isabella renounced any claim to the throne, the crown would pass to the next in line, which, according to ancient laws, could potentially be someone like Lord Blackwood if he had royal blood in his ancestry. Dr. Vasquez, who had been quietly checking historical records on her tablet, looked up with a shocked expression. "Your Majesty, I've been researching Lord Blackwood's family history. His great-grandmother was a princess of Valdemir. If the direct royal line ended, he would have a legitimate claim to the throne." The conspiracy was now becoming clear. Lord Blackwood had been planning a coup, using Queen Isabella's jealousy and resentment as tools to eliminate the royal family. But his plan required more than just murder. It needed to appear legal and justified. The abdication demand, Captain Thornfield realized. If you abdicate and Prince Edmund is eliminated, Lord Blackwood can claim the throne legally. But if you're simply murdered, there might be questions about his legitimacy. Queen Isabella's face had gone completely pale as she realized she had been used as a pawn in Lord Blackwood's larger game. "He promised me I would rule beside him," she whispered. "He said after Alexander was gone, we would marry and share the crown." "And you believed him?" King Alexander asked, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and pity. Before Queen Isabella could answer, the lights in the palace suddenly went out. Emergency generators kicked in moments later, bathing everything in eerie red light. In the confusion, Captain Thornfield heard the sound of breaking glass from somewhere in the palace. "They're making their move," he said grimly. "Your Majesty, we need to get you to the secure chambers immediately." But as they prepared to move, a new voice echoed through the halls of the palace, Lord Blackwood's voice, amplified by the palace's emergency communication system. "My fellow citizens of Valdemir," his voice boomed, "I regret to inform you that King Alexander has fallen gravely ill and is unable to continue his duties. As his closest advisor and a descendant of the royal bloodline, I am prepared to assume the responsibilities of leadership to ensure the kingdom's stability." Captain Thornfield realized that Lord Blackwood was already implementing his coup, broadcasting to the entire kingdom. But the captain also knew something Lord Blackwood didn't. King Alexander was still alive, and they still had time to stop this conspiracy. "Your Majesty," Captain Thornfield said urgently, "we need to get you to the radio room so you can broadcast to the people and expose Lord Blackwood's lies." As they prepared to leave the study, Queen Isabella called out desperately, "Alexander, I know where Edmund is. Let me help you stop Vincent, and I'll tell you everything." King Alexander paused, torn between his anger at his wife's betrayal and his desperate need to save his brother. The next decision he made would determine not only the fate of his family, but the future of the entire kingdom. King Alexander stared at his wife for a long moment, weighing his options. Every instinct told him not to trust the woman who had tried to poison him, but his love for his brother overrode his anger. "If you're lying to me, Isabella, I will show you no mercy," he said coldly. "Where is Edmund?" "The old wine cellar beneath the East Tower," Queen Isabella said quickly. "Vincent is holding him there." "But Alexander, there are armed men with him. Vincent has been recruiting mercenaries for weeks." Captain Thornfield processed this information rapidly. The East Tower wine cellar was one of the most isolated parts of the palace, with thick stone walls that would muffle any sounds. It was also easily defended, which made a rescue attempt extremely dangerous. "How many men?" Captain Thornfield asked. "At least 6, maybe more," Queen Isabella replied. "They're not palace guards. Vincent brought them from outside the kingdom." Lord Blackwood's voice continued echoing through the palace communication system, telling the people of Valdemir that their king was gravely ill and that emergency measures were necessary. With each passing minute, his lies became more believable to those who couldn't see the truth. "We need to split up," Captain Thornfield decided. "Your Majesty, I'll take half the guards to rescue Prince Edmund. You take the other half and get to the radio room to expose Lord Blackwood's coup." "No," King Alexander said firmly. "I won't leave my brother's rescue to others. We go together, save Edmund first, then deal with Blackwood." Captain Thornfield wanted to argue, but he recognized the determination in the king's voice. Family came first, even at the risk of losing the kingdom. Your Majesty, Dr. Vasquez interjected, the arsenic in your system will make you weaker than usual. You should let Captain Thornfield handle the rescue. I'm still strong enough to save my brother, King Alexander replied. Then he turned to Queen Isabella. You're coming with us. If this is a trap, you'll be the first to pay for it. The group moved carefully through the darkened palace corridors, using the red emergency lighting to navigate. Captain Thornfield had positioned his most trusted guards around them, but he knew that Lord Blackwood's mercenaries could be anywhere. As they approached the East Tower, they could hear voices coming from below. Captain Thornfield motioned for everyone to stop and listen. Through the thick stone walls, they could make out Lord Blackwood's voice giving orders to his men. The king should be dead by now, Lord Blackwood was saying. If the poison worked, we can proceed with the original plan. If not, we use the prince as leverage to force his abdication. Another voice, rougher and clearly belonging to one of the mercenaries, responded. What about the queen? Do we still need her? Isabella has served her purpose, Lord Blackwood replied coldly. Once I'm officially king, she'll meet with an unfortunate accident. Queen Isabella gasped quietly, finally understanding that she had been nothing more than a disposable tool in Lord Blackwood's plan. The man who had promised to share the throne with her had always intended to eliminate her once. She was no longer useful. Captain Thornfield used hand signals to position his guards around the entrance to the wine cellar. The heavy wooden door was reinforced with iron bands, but it was the only way in or out. They would have to go through it to reach Prince Edmund. On my signal, Captain Thornfield whispered to his men, we go in fast and hard. Our priority is protecting the royal family. King Alexander drew his ceremonial sword, the blade gleaming in the red emergency light. Despite the arsenic in his system, adrenaline was giving him strength. Let's end this. The attack was swift and coordinated. Captain Thornfield's guards burst through the cellar door, catching Lord Blackwood's mercenaries by surprise. The confined space worked in their favor, as the mercenaries couldn't use their superior numbers effectively. In the chaos of the fight, King Alexander spotted his brother tied to a chair in the corner of the cellar. Prince Edmund was conscious but looked beaten and exhausted. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, but his eyes were alert and angry. Alexander, Prince Edmund shouted over the sounds of fighting. Behind you! King Alexander spun around just in time to see Lord Blackwood emerging from the shadows with a crossbow aimed at his heart. The man who had been his trusted advisor for 20 years now looked at him with pure hatred. You should have drunk the tea, Lord Blackwood snarled. It would have been so much easier for everyone. Vincent, why? King Alexander asked, genuinely confused. I trusted you. I gave you everything you could want. Everything except what I deserved, Lord Blackwood replied. Do you know what it's like to serve a family that stole the throne from your ancestors? My great-grandmother should have been queen, not some distant cousin who bought his way to power. The historical grievance explained Lord Blackwood's motivation, but it didn't justify his actions. King Alexander realized that his advisor had been harboring resentment for decades, waiting for the right moment to strike. The past is the past, Vincent, King Alexander said, trying to reason with him. We can work this out. The past is never past when you're reminded of it every day, Lord Blackwood replied. But it doesn't matter now. You're going to abdicate or I'll kill your brother right here. Captain Thornfield, who had been fighting 2 mercenaries near the entrance, broke free and started moving toward Lord Blackwood. But the advisor spotted him immediately. Stop right there. Captain, or the king dies, Lord Blackwood warned, swinging the crossbow toward King Alexander. At that moment, Queen Isabella did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She threw herself between Lord Blackwood and her husband, taking the crossbow bolt meant for the king. The iron point pierced her shoulder and she collapsed to the ground with a cry of pain. Isabella! King Alexander knelt beside his wife, pressing his hands against her wound to stop the bleeding. The distraction gave Captain Thornfield the opening he needed. He lunged forward and tackled Lord Blackwood before the advisor could reload his crossbow. The 2 men crashed into a rack of wine bottles, sending glass and wine spilling across the stone floor. It's over, Vincent, Captain Thornfield said, pinning Lord Blackwood to the ground. But Lord Blackwood smiled grimly. No, Captain. It's just beginning. Even if you stop me, my broadcast has already reached the kingdom. The people think their king is dying, How long before they lose faith in a monarchy that can't even protect itself? Captain Thornfield realized that Lord Blackwood was right about one thing. They needed to get King Alexander on the radio immediately to prove he was alive and in control. But first they had to deal with the wounded queen and the traumatized prince. The conspiracy had been exposed, but the battle for the kingdom's future was far from over. Dr. Vasquez immediately rushed to treat Queen Isabella's wound while Captain Thornfield secured the remaining mercenaries. Prince Edmund, though weak from his ordeal, insisted on standing to embrace his brother. "I thought I was going to die down here," Prince Edmund admitted, his voice shaky. Vincent kept talking about how the royal bloodline needed to be purified and how our family had stolen what rightfully belonged to his. King Alexander helped support his brother while keeping one eye on his wounded wife. Despite everything Isabella had done, seeing her risk her life to save his had stirred complicated emotions within him. "Why did you take that bolt for me?" King Alexander asked her as Dr. Vasquez worked to remove the crossbow bolt from her shoulder. Queen Isabella winced in pain but managed to speak. "Because I realized that Vincent never loved me. He was using me just like everyone else in my life has used me. But you, despite my terrible actions, you actually cared about me." "The wound isn't life-threatening," Dr. Vasquez announced, "but she needs proper medical attention in the palace infirmary." Captain Thornfield had finished securing the cellar and was growing increasingly anxious about the political situation. "Your Majesty, we need to get you to the radio room immediately. Every minute that passes makes Lord Blackwood's lies more believable to the people." As they prepared to leave the wine cellar, Lord Blackwood called out from where he sat bound and guarded. "You think exposing me will solve everything, Alexander? I've planted seeds of doubt throughout the kingdom. Even if you prove you're alive, people will question why you couldn't protect yourself from your own wife and advisor." King Alexander paused, realizing there was truth in Lord Blackwood's words. The conspiracy had revealed serious security flaws in the palace, and the people might lose confidence in their monarch's ability to protect the kingdom, if he couldn't even protect himself. "We'll deal with that later," Captain Thornfield said firmly. "Right now we need to focus on stopping this coup attempt." The group made their way through the palace toward the radio room, with guards carrying Queen Isabella on a stretcher. As they moved through the corridors, they encountered palace staff who were confused and frightened by Lord Blackwood's broadcasts and the emergency lockdown. "Your Majesty," exclaimed Mrs. Hamilton, the head housekeeper, when she saw King Alexander. "Thank goodness you're alive. That Lord Blackwood was saying terrible things about your health. Spread the word to all staff," King Alexander instructed her. "I am alive and well, and Lord Blackwood is a traitor who will face justice." When they reached the radio room, Captain Thornfield's technical team had already prepared the broadcasting equipment. King Alexander would be able to reach not only the palace but the entire kingdom through the national radio network. "Your Majesty," the radio technician said, "Lord Blackwood's broadcast is still running on a loop. We can override it, but we need to act quickly before more people believe his story." King Alexander sat down at the microphone, gathering his thoughts for what might be the most important speech of his reign. Prince Edmund stood beside him for support, while Captain Thornfield monitored the security situation. "My fellow citizens of Valdemir," King Alexander began, his voice strong and clear, "I am speaking to you live from the royal palace to assure you that I am alive, healthy, and still your king. The broadcasts you may have heard from Lord Vincent Blackwood are lies, part of a conspiracy to steal the throne." Throughout the kingdom, people stopped what they were doing to listen to their king's voice. In homes, shops, and public squares, citizens gathered around radios to hear the truth about what was happening in their capital. "Lord Blackwood, my former advisor, conspired with others to poison me and kidnap my brother, Prince Edmund," King Alexander continued. "Thanks to the bravery of Captain Thornfield and the Royal Guard, this plot has been uncovered and stopped." The king paused, knowing that his next words would be crucial for maintaining the people's confidence. "I know that many of you are concerned about the security of our kingdom, when such a conspiracy could develop within the palace itself. I share your concerns, and I promise you that we will conduct a thorough investigation to ensure this never happens again." As King Alexander continued his broadcast, Captain Thornfield received reports from his guards throughout the palace. The remaining mercenaries had been captured, and Lord Blackwood's supporters among the palace staff had been identified and arrested. "Your Majesty, one of his advisors whispered. We're receiving reports that some military units in the outer provinces heard Lord Blackwood's broadcasts and are mobilizing. They think there's been a successful coup. This news added a new urgency to the situation. If military commanders believed Lord Blackwood was now in charge, they might march on the capital or worse, try to establish their own local authority in the chaos. King Alexander addressed this concern directly in his broadcast. To all military commanders and provincial governors, I want to be absolutely clear. I remain your king and commander-in-chief. Any orders claimed to come from Lord Blackwood or his associates are illegitimate and should be ignored. Prince Edmund leaned closer to the microphone. This is Prince Edmund speaking. I am alive and unharmed despite Lord Blackwood's attempts to kidnap me. The royal family stands united, and the kingdom remains stable under King Alexander's leadership. Dr. Vasquez, who had been monitoring Queen Isabella's condition, approached the king with an update. Your Majesty, the Queen is stable, but she's asking to speak with you. She says she has more information about other conspirators. This revelation worried Captain Thornfield. If there were additional conspirators still at large, the danger to the royal family wasn't over. They had caught the main plotters, but a conspiracy this elaborate might have backup plans or additional supporters waiting to act. How many more people are involved in this? King Alexander asked into the microphone, though he was really addressing Queen Isabella, who was listening from the medical station nearby. Queen Isabella's voice, weak but clear, came through a separate microphone that Dr. Vasquez had set up. Alexander, there are 3 more people. 2 are palace guards who were recruited by Vincent, and 1 is a member of the kitchen staff who provided access to your food and drink. Captain Thornfield immediately dispatched guards to arrest these individuals. The conspiracy was larger than they had initially realized, but Queen Isabella's cooperation was helping them identify everyone involved. As King Alexander concluded his broadcast to the nation, he knew that the immediate crisis was over, but the long-term consequences of the conspiracy would take time to resolve. The kingdom's faith in their monarchy had been shaken, and rebuilding that trust would be his greatest challenge yet. The king's broadcast had an immediate impact across the kingdom. Within hours, reports began coming in from provincial governors and military commanders, confirming their loyalty to King Alexander. The attempted coup was collapsing as quickly as it had begun. Captain Thornfield's guards successfully arrested the 3 remaining conspirators Queen Isabella had identified. Guard Sergeant Mills and Corporal Davies, both of whom had served in the palace for over 5 years, were found with gold coins bearing Lord Blackwood's family crest, payment for their betrayal. The kitchen staff member, a young woman named Sarah, broke down in tears when arrested and immediately confessed to adding small amounts of arsenic to the king's meals over the past 2 months. I didn't know it would hurt him so badly. Sarah sobbed to Captain Thornfield during her interrogation. Lord Blackwood told me it was just medicine to make the king sleep better. He said the king was working too hard and needed rest. Captain Thornfield realized that Lord Blackwood had been clever in his recruitment, convincing some conspirators that they were helping rather than harming the king. This manipulation made the betrayal even more sinister. Dr. Vasquez had finished treating Queen Isabella and reported that her wound would heal completely with proper care. However, the psychological impact of realizing how thoroughly Lord Blackwood had manipulated her was taking a heavier toll. I was such a fool, Queen Isabella told King Alexander when he visited her in the medical bay. I let my jealousy and insecurity blind me to what Vincent was really doing. King Alexander sat beside his wife's bed, still struggling with his own complex emotions. Isabella, you tried to kill me, but you also saved my life. I don't know how to process that. I don't expect your forgiveness, Queen Isabella replied quietly. I know I'll have to face trial for treason. I just want you to know that when I saw Vincent pointing that crossbow at you, I remembered why I fell in love with you in the first place. Before King Alexander could respond, Captain Thornfield entered with urgent news. Your Majesty, we've received a message from the capital city. Word of the conspiracy has spread among the citizens, and they're demanding to see you in person. They want proof that you're truly safe and in control. This request made sense but created a security challenge. After the evening's events, Captain Thornfield was reluctant to expose the king to any public appearance where additional conspirators might still be lurking. The people have a right to see their king, King Alexander said firmly. We'll arrange a public appearance tomorrow morning. Your Majesty, Captain Thornfield protested, it's too dangerous. We haven't had time to properly investigate everyone who might have been involved in this conspiracy. Prince Edmund, who had been quiet during most of the conversation, spoke up. Alexander is right, Captain. If we hide in the palace now, it will look like we're afraid. That's exactly what Lord Blackwood wanted, to make us appear weak and incapable of leading. Dr. Vasquez added her medical perspective. Your Majesty, the arsenic in your system will continue affecting you for several more days. You'll experience fatigue and possible dizziness. A public appearance might be physically challenging. Despite these concerns, King Alexander was determined to show the kingdom that their monarchy remained strong. We'll make it work. Captain Thornfield, I want you to plan a route through the capital that allows maximum visibility while maintaining security. As they discussed the logistics of the public appearance, a messenger arrived with news from the dungeons where Lord Blackwood was being held. The former advisor was demanding to speak with King Alexander, claiming he had information about foreign involvement in the conspiracy. Foreign involvement, Captain Thornfield repeated with alarm. This conspiracy could have international implications. King Alexander decided to confront Lord Blackwood personally, despite Captain Thornfield's security concerns. They made their way to the palace dungeons, a grim stone chamber beneath the main castle where political prisoners were traditionally held. Lord Blackwood sat in his cell, no longer the polished courtier who had advised the king for 20 years. His clothes were torn from the fight in the wine cellar, and his face bore the expression of a man whose carefully laid plans had crumbled around him. You wanted to speak with me, Vincent, King Alexander said, standing just outside the cell bars. What's this about foreign involvement? Lord Blackwood smiled coldly. Did you really think I could organize all of this alone, Alexander? The mercenaries, the poison, the communication equipment to override the palace broadcasts. Where do you think the funding came from? Captain Thornfield felt his blood run cold. If foreign powers were backing Lord Blackwood's coup attempt, it meant the conspiracy was part of a larger plot against the kingdom of Valdemir. Which country? King Alexander demanded. Who paid you to betray your own kingdom? The Duchy of Ravencrest, Lord Blackwood revealed. Duke Marcus has been planning to expand his territory for years, and removing a strong king like you was the first step. They promised to make me a puppet ruler under their protection. The Duchy of Ravencrest was Valdemir's neighbor to the north, a smaller but wealthy nation known for its aggressive trade policies and territorial ambitions. Duke Marcus had always been cordial in diplomatic relations, but apparently he had been planning conquest behind closed doors. How much do they know about our defenses? Captain Thornfield asked urgently. What information did you give them? Lord Blackwood's smile widened. Everything, Captain. Troop positions, castle fortifications, supply routes. I've been passing information to Ravencrest agents for over a year. This revelation transformed the conspiracy from a domestic betrayal into a national security crisis. King Alexander realized that his kingdom might be facing an imminent invasion, with their enemies already possessing detailed knowledge of Valdemir's defenses. Your Majesty, Captain Thornfield said grimly, we need to assume that Duke Marcus will move quickly now that his coup attempt has failed. He might try to invade while he thinks we're still dealing with internal chaos. King Alexander's mind raced through the implications. His kingdom was facing its greatest external threat in decades, and they were discovering it just hours after barely surviving an internal coup. The timing was no coincidence. Duke Marcus had probably planned to invade immediately after Lord Blackwood successfully seized the throne. How long do we have? King Alexander asked Lord Blackwood. Duke Marcus was expecting my success signal by midnight, Lord Blackwood replied. When he doesn't receive it, he'll know the coup failed. I'd estimate you have perhaps 2 days before Ravencrest forces cross your border. The kingdom of Valdemir was about to face its greatest test, and King Alexander would have to rally his people and military to defend their homeland, while still recovering from the betrayal that had nearly destroyed the royal family from within. The dawn of the next day brought urgent activity throughout the palace as King Alexander prepared to address both the immediate threat from Duke Marcus and the long-term security of his kingdom. Despite Dr. Vasquez's concerns about the lingering effects of arsenic poisoning, the king refused to show any weakness when his people needed strong leadership most. Captain Thornfield had worked through the night coordinating with military commanders across the kingdom. Your Majesty, he reported, Our border forces are on high alert, and I've recalled all troops from leave. We also sent fast riders to warn our allies in the southern kingdoms about Duke Marcus's aggressive intentions. The public appearance King Alexander had promised could not be delayed, despite the new external threat. The people of Valdemir needed to see their king strong and in control, especially if they were about to face an invasion. As the royal family prepared to appear before the crowds gathered in the capital's main square, Queen Isabella made an unexpected request. Despite her wound and her impending trial for treason, she asked to accompany the king to publicly confess her crimes and show the people that the royal family was united against external threats. "Isabella, you don't have to do this," King Alexander told his wife as Dr. Vasquez helped her into formal dress that concealed her bandaged shoulder. "Your confession could make your trial more difficult. My confession could also help rebuild trust in the monarchy," Queen Isabella replied. "The people need to see that. We can acknowledge our mistakes and move forward together." Prince Edmund, still bearing bruises from his captivity, but determined to show strength, stood with his brother as they prepared to address the nation. "Alexander, whatever happens with Duke Marcus, we face it as a family. The conspiracy failed because we stood together when it mattered most." The royal procession to the public square was carefully orchestrated by Captain Thornfield's security team. Guards in full ceremonial armor lined the route, while plainclothes agents mingled with the crowd to watch for any remaining threats. When King Alexander appeared on the palace balcony overlooking the square, a massive cheer erupted from the gathered citizens. Thousands of people had come to see their king, many carrying flowers and banners expressing their loyalty. "My people," King Alexander began, his voice carrying across the square through strategically placed speakers. "Yesterday our kingdom faced a great test. Traitors within our own palace tried to destroy everything we have built together." The crowd listened in respectful silence as the king explained the conspiracy, carefully avoiding details that might compromise national security. He spoke of Lord Blackwood's betrayal, the poisoning attempts, and Prince Edmund's kidnapping without revealing the connection to Duke Marcus. Then, in a moment that surprised everyone except her husband, Queen Isabella stepped forward to address the crowd. "I must confess my own crimes to you," she said, her voice strong despite her physical pain. "I allowed jealousy and manipulation to turn me against my husband. I participated in the plot to poison King Alexander, and for this I am deeply ashamed." The crowd stirred uncomfortably, but Queen Isabella continued. "However, when I saw the true evil behind the conspiracy, I chose to protect my husband rather than continue serving the traitors. I do not ask for your forgiveness, but I ask that you judge me by my final actions as well as my crimes." King Alexander placed his hand on his wife's shoulder in a gesture that spoke volumes to the watching crowd. Despite her betrayal, he was showing mercy and the possibility of redemption. "The conspiracy has been defeated," King Alexander continued, "but our trials are not over. Even now, foreign enemies who supported the traitors may threaten our borders. I call upon every citizen of Valdemir to stand ready to defend our kingdom and our way of life." The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers of loyalty filled the air, and many young men began volunteering on the spot to join the kingdom's defense forces. That afternoon, as the royal family returned to the palace, urgent news arrived from the northern border. Duke Marcus's forces had indeed begun mobilizing, but King Alexander's swift response had caught them off guard. The warned border fortresses were fully manned and ready, while Ravencrest's spies found their usual intelligence sources, particularly Lord Blackwood, no longer available. "Your Majesty," Captain Thornfield reported, "Duke Marcus has requested a diplomatic meeting under a flag of truce. He claims he wants to discuss recent misunderstandings between our kingdoms." King Alexander recognized this as Duke Marcus's attempt to gauge Valdemir's strength and buy time to adjust his invasion plans. "Arrange the meeting, but make sure he sees our full military preparation. I want him to understand that his conspiracy has only made us stronger." The diplomatic meeting took place 3 days later at a neutral location on the border. Duke Marcus, a thin man with calculating eyes, arrived with a small retinue, clearly expecting to negotiate with a weakened kingdom dealing with internal chaos. Instead, He found King Alexander in full ceremonial armor, flanked by Prince Edmund and Captain Thornfield, representing a unified and militarily prepared kingdom. The sight of the royal family standing together, obviously healthy and in control, was not what Duke Marcus had anticipated. "Your Majesty," Duke Marcus began carefully, "I understand there was some political turbulence in your kingdom recently. I hope everything has been resolved peacefully." "Completely resolved," King Alexander replied coolly. "We've arrested all the traitors, including those who took foreign gold to betray their own people. We know everything about the conspiracy, Duke Marcus, everything." The implied threat was clear. Duke Marcus realized that his invasion plans were compromised, and that Valdemir was prepared for war rather than weakened by internal conflict. "Perhaps there have been misunderstandings," Duke Marcus said, backing down. "The Duchy of Ravencrest has always valued peaceful relations with our neighbors. Then you'll have no objection to a formal treaty reaffirming those peaceful intentions." Prince Edmund interjected, "including reparations for your support of treason against our crown." Faced with a choice between a costly war against a prepared enemy or diplomatic resolution with financial penalties, Duke Marcus chose the latter. The treaty signed that day not only prevented an invasion, but also provided funds to strengthen Valdemir's defenses against future threats. 6 months later, the kingdom had fully recovered from the conspiracy. Lord Blackwood and his mercenaries faced trial for treason and were sentenced to life imprisonment. The corrupted guards and kitchen staff received lighter sentences in exchange for their cooperation in revealing the full extent of the plot. Queen Isabella's trial was more complex. Her confession and her ultimate decision to save King Alexander's life were weighed against her participation in the conspiracy. She was sentenced to house arrest in a remote palace property, where she would spend the next 5 years reflecting on her actions while contributing to charitable works for the kingdom. King Alexander, his health fully recovered from the arsenic poisoning, had emerged from the crisis as a stronger and more respected leader. The conspiracy that was meant to destroy him had instead proven his resilience and the loyalty of his people. Captain Thornfield was promoted to chief of all palace security, implementing new protocols to prevent future infiltration. Prince Edmund took on greater responsibilities in the kingdom's defense planning, his experience as a kidnapping victim, providing valuable insights into security vulnerabilities. As King Alexander stood in his private study one evening, looking out at the peaceful kingdom he had almost lost, he reflected on the lessons learned from those terrible days. Trust was precious and fragile, but it could be rebuilt. Family bonds, when tested by fire, could emerge stronger than ever, and sometimes the greatest threats came not from enemies abroad, but from the shadows within one's own home. The kingdom of Valdemir had survived its darkest hour and emerged into a new dawn of unity, strength, and wisdom gained through trial. The royal guard's observation had indeed shocked everyone, but it had also saved a kingdom.